Adobe Acrobat Studio, so brand new. Show me all the things PDFs can do. Do your work with ease and speed. PDF Spaces is all you need. Do hours of research in an instant with key insights from an AI assistant. Pick a template with a click. Now your prezzo looks super slick. Close that deal? Yeah, you won. Do that, doing that, did that, done. Now you can do that with Acrobat. Now you can do that with the all-new Acrobat. It's time to do your best work with the all-new Adobe Acrobat Studio.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
Politics is a passion for people like me, people that like to listen to things like this podcast. It can challenge you, it can uplift you, it can drive you, it can envelop your entire life, it can break your heart, and it can also make you laugh. Hello and welcome to the Full Comment Podcast. My name's Brian Lilly, your host, and this week we take a look at a book and speak to its author who does all of that. He'll make you laugh about politics. He's got some funny lines in this book. He will make you angry or upset, challenged, make you scratch your head. Mark Leiren-Young has been active in NDP and Green politics for years, and while he still believes in their ideals, he's had a bit of a moment where he is backing away from both parties, wondering where they go from here and if they can win. We talk about that. We talk about how Justin Trudeau co-opted so many of those issues and really damaged both parties. And we talked about where they can go forward and why it matters. The book is called Greener Than Thou, Surviving the Toxic Sludge of Canadian Ecopolitics. It's part of Sutherland Quarterly, and I hope you enjoy our conversation. So, Mark, what is greener than thou? It sounds like you're making a religious statement with that.
Well, I sort of am. One of the things that I sort of realized as I was writing this is that the NDP is a religion and the Green Party is a cult. and I was floored how often when I started fact checking this, I started sort of subtly fact checking with various people, and the number of times the word cult came up in describing the Greens was mind blowing. And I've always felt the NDP was a religion.
But I mean, you still believe in the ideals that these parties claim they stand for, right?
Yes, which means this is kind of...
It's a difficult moment for you.
Oh, it really is. Because it was heartbreaking to write this, and yet I still wanted it to be really funny. So I feel like this is the funniest, most heartbreaking thing I've ever written.
Well, you survived in making it funny. Look, you open with a quote from Rosemary Barton at CBC saying, it looked like I'll paraphrase it, but something to the effect of, it looked like the Green Party had a moment. Now it doesn't. And so, as someone that's been covering politics a long time, yeah, there was a period where it looked like the Greens were going somewhere here in Ontario, mainly due to the cult of personality of Mike Schreiner. I think they've gotten up to 2 seats, and that's not a slight against Mike, but he's really embodies it. But in many ways, the federal Green Party has become a cult of personality of Elizabeth May. Is she leader or is she not? I think it depends on the day and her mood.
That's what it's feeling like right now and has for a while. And even if you look at Jonathan Pedno, if you look at how he came about, Elizabeth finds somebody, runs with somebody, declares there's going to be a co-leadership situation. It's never approved by the party. And he comes third in the leadership race. So it was really interesting how that was then engineered to declare, he's the co-leader, just not officially. He leaves, and then just before the election's supposed to start, he's magically back, and the party has somehow approved co-leadership. I've got no idea what they were so busy with between, the time that he was supposed to become co-leader and the time that he left and the time that he came back, that they couldn't fix that if they really wanted to. So it really felt like Elizabeth just decided she wanted a co-leader and to tee somebody up to take over after she left.
So my question during all of that is, if there's two leaders, who goes to the debate? Because you're not getting two podiums on the stage when all the other parties have one leader.
Well, as we saw this time, the answer was no one. But it was set to be Pedno, which would have been interesting.
So you open the book calling her the unsinkable Elizabeth May. Tell me your experience working with, I guess we would say, Canada's longest serving party leader.
Absolutely. Um, she is tireless, right? She is. There was a moment during the campaign that I was working on where she was standing on, not a street corner, I don't know, not quite a cul-de-sac, but basically like this big traffic circle in Nanaimo, waving signs for Paul Manley in the by-election that really I felt potentially changed the fate of the Greens for the better. And I turned to her and I said, "Do you ever sleep?" And in a lot of ways, it was the most serious I'd ever seen her. And she sort of looked, and for a moment, she kind of hesitated and went, "I nap." And I thought, I absolutely believe that, because she is the face, she's the brand, she's the freaking A&W root bearer of the Green Party of Canada. So she's
Almost
not
20
just,
years as leader now.
yeah, absolutely. And that has its benefits and has its drawbacks.
So you talk about the idea that she has built all of this around her, um, having been involved in NDP and Green politics over the years. Uh, I guess she has kept the brand going, but
Yep.
shouldn't she have stepped aside at some point to allow for renewal, allow for people to take over?
I was really fascinated at how the last few leadership races have played out. Uh, I really don't get and have been, asking around and still don't understand how Mike Morris didn't take over the party when he was elected out of Ontario. I really don't understand why the party didn't put everything they had into holding his seat in Ontario. That baffled me. Uh, they're doing ads with Jonathan Pedno, who came fifth in his riding, and a really good finish in his riding would have been third. So, the whole Green Party leadership thing landed him fifth place. But if they put Mike Morris and tagged him at the end of every ad, maybe he holds his seat in Ontario. I don't know why that didn't happen.
Well,
Right? It's like, it baffled me.
you describe early on how there used to be a tradition until Elizabeth May won in on Vancouver Island. There was a tradition that Green Party leaders would just find the most unwinnable riding and run there. And she famously ran against Peter MacKay, and you said her odds of winning were like winning the Lotto 649. Yeah,
Pretty
one
much.
in, I think that's 1 in 14 million, by the way.
Yeah,
You know, you know,
that works.
and now that riding is held by a liberal who left to go spend more time with his family, came back and won again. So it seems like if you're an incumbent in that riding in Central Nova, you're always going to win. And Elizabeth May was never going to win, but she did it. Anna May Paul did it. Pendel did it. Like, so is it that they like losing more than winning?
I don't for the life of me understand the strategy there, because there are ridings that are winnable out there. There are ridings where green issues are top of mind. And to go, hey, I think I'm going to run against the most popular politician in the province seems like a pretty odd flex, And right now, Elizabeth's riding, which is where I live, is almost that safe for her.
Mike Schreiner has figured that out in Ontario. He decided that he was going to run in Guelph, university town. The center of that riding is filled with students. It is filled with, there's two Guelphs. There's the area around the university, and that is very green. And then there's the areas outside, and that is very conservative or blue liberal. It depends. Mike Schreiner figured out, okay, we can win there. And he has been seriously trying to figure out the other ridings that he can win. That seems like an attempt at a serious organization, even though he only has two, and they seem to run things very professionally. In your experience working with the Greens, working with Elizabeth May, was there any sense of professionalism in the organization?
Yeah, there was. I mean, there was a sense of going after certain ridings and knowing, you know, what was plausible and what wasn't. Uh, and there were a couple ridings out here for a while really looked like they were going to turn green. And it was a bit shocking that they didn't.
Elizabeth May is an odd duck in that she came out of working with the progressive conservatives under Brian Mulroney. And I mean, Jean Charest was the first environment minister Canada ever had. And I think Mulroney gave it to him because he's like, you're young. And back then he was. Jean's not so young anymore. You're a young guy. The whippersnappers care about the environment. You go look after this. Did Mulroney knowingly or unknowingly give birth to the eco-politics movement in this country? I mean, it had been bubbling and growing in Europe and places like Germany for years, but we didn't really have that until Brian Mulroney helped give birth to Elizabeth May. I give him credit for a lot of things. I'm not sure about this.
Well, what's fascinating is that there's always an assumption that the more right-wing governments tend to be terrible for the environment. That is not always the case. And you look at Mulroney going, I think we should have an environment minister. But you also look at Mulroney going, acid rain, bad idea. And I mean, one of the biggest wins you can point to environmentally is wasn't it Mulroney and Reagan?
Even Stephen Harper expanded national parks, made huge swaths of British Columbia protected territory. You got no credit for it. And, so I'm not sure why he did it. He was depicted as someone trying to pillage the land and the environment. But he actually expanded national parks tremendously.
Well, I mean, out here in BC, it was Gordon Campbell who, really in a lot of ways invented the Green Party out here by drafting Andrew Weaver to come up with a climate plan and introducing a carbon tax that became the model for carbon taxes around the world, to the point where Sephora Berman, environmentalist who actually wrote a book with her, presented him with an award for his environmental work, which would have seemed unthinkable. And just the photo op of that was just, I think, heads exploded on all ends of the political spectrum when that happened.
And even though, for our folks that are not familiar with BC politics, Gordon Campbell may have been premier while he was leader of the Liberal Party. Gordon Campbell, very much a conservative, unlike Christy Clark, who replaced him, who was from the Liberal side. The BC Liberal Party, which no longer exists, was just there to keep the NDP out of power. And you're saying he gave birth to the BC Greens.
He gave birth to BC Greens by really bringing Andrew Weaver into who became the leader of the BC Greens, into BC politics. And what happened there is that Christy Clark then declared she was going to get rid of the carbon tax, and Weaver decides to run for the Greens and eventually becomes leader. But it was Christy Clark going, I'm getting rid of that tax.
Held the balance of power, which allowed John Horgan to become premier.
Yep.
So it is an odd relationship then. So where should the Greens be? I'm trying to remember the name of the guy who was Green Party leader in Ontario years ago. He was a fairly business-oriented guy. He'd come out of the small business community.
Jim Harris.
Yes, Jim Harris.
Yeah.
But he cared deeply about the environment, and he saw the Greens as, not necessarily a left-wing party. And now I see an awful lot of people who think the Greens should mainly be the NDP, but with pumped up environmental concerns. Well, if you've already got an NDP, is it smart politics to go in there and try and replicate the NDP?
It really hasn't worked, but I mean, it's interesting because the Greens branding goes in a different direction. So in 2019, it was the slogan that came out was "not left, not right, forward," and the Greens were trying very hard to go, no, we're not coming for the NDP on the left. We're our own thing, but that's not generally where it stays.
And so what is it? Is it the leadership or is it the membership that is drawn to the Green Party that drives that? Or, you know, let's be blunt, a real problem for the Greens is that if you are a rabid anti-Semite, you've got a home in the Green Party. You know, the only federal party recently to have a Jewish leader, and she was viciously attacked within her own party.
Which she talked about quite a bit. Uh, that came up a fair bit when she left. And
We're talking Anime
Black,
Paul for those that
Anime
haven't
Paul,
followed along.
The Black Jewish leader who basically and I think it's important for anybody who doesn't have this context, though I can't imagine any of your listeners don't. This is long before, what's going on now. This is long before October 7th.
Yeah.
That Anime Paul was dealing with a level of anti-Semitism that she seemed to be quite shocked by from everything that I read. But let's see. Yeah, it's sorry. We moved away from where we were, and I'm trying to make sure that I'm answering your question.
Well, so I'm asking why is it the leadership or is it the membership that drives this push to some radical positions or an attempt to overtake the NDP, whether it is pushing the politics to the left or, the problem of anti-Semitism?
Well, I think it's a bit of both. I think what you end up with is that the Greens are essentially a party made up of people who feel disenfranchised from other parties, right? So you've got a lot of contrarians, and it's the amount of overlap that there seemed to be between Greens and the People's Party was a little shocking, although not everybody I spoke to at the Greens. So during the pandemic, because I've got a podcast where I deal with science, I felt really uncomfortable having any COVID deniers on my Facebook page and on my social media. I was like, I don't feel great about amplifying this. So I started nuking anybody who was, full on anti-vax conspiracy theory. That was on my Facebook pages entirely from people who I had connected with through being green.
I remember telling folks that the growth of the PPC, that Maxime Bernier was taking as much from the Green Party as he was from the Conservative Party at times in certain places.
Yeah.
That these were crunchy cons going over to granola eating crunchy cons going over to the PPC.
Well, you've also got BC, you've got the phenomenon of traditionally, I know that we baffle the rest of Canada in so many different ways, but one of them is like when the Reform Party came up, you would have Reformers or Canadian Alliance members elected in the exact same ridings federally that the NDP rep provincially. And I kept trying to explain to people when I was living here and I was writing for various Toronto publications. That's because the BC response to the federal government tends to be whatever party is going to give the middle finger. That's kind of how people roll here. So it was like, okay, who's going to hold people's feet to the fire? Yeah, we think that's going to be Preston's team this election. Who's going to hold people? Yeah, we think it's going to be NDP this election. It's very, you don't always see BC going, yes, let's vote for the party that's going to win. It's going to be we're going to vote for the party that's going to annoy people.
Well, look, even Elizabeth May's riding was previously held by Gary Lunn, who had been in Stephen Harper's cabinet and was first elected as a reformer.
And Gary Lund's numbers were better when he was a reformer, right? When he was the outlier, he actually had better numbers. I mean, he still got elected under Harper, but he did really well when he was an outsider. And I mean, when Elizabeth came into that riding, I had no doubt the riding was going to go, ha, I mean, this is a, proudly iconoclastic riding. I had no doubt it was going to go, yeah, we think there should be a, national party leader from here.
We'll go from conservative to green. I mean, there's certain areas where in Ontario where you will find blue-orange switchers, but nothing is quite like BC politics, where it's blue, orange, green switchers and never red. Never going to go for the Liberals. Just go, I like how you put it, the going for the party that's going to annoy folks.
Oh, that's why this election was so shocking. Yeah.
When we come back, we'll take a quick break, and I want to ask you about why the NDP is the arch enemy of the NDP, because you do have experience with both parties, and both of them are failing you. I would say they're failing Canadian democracy at the moment, because we need strong opposition, and well, that's not coming from that side of the aisle at the moment. Back in moments.
Getting ready to step into your career era? Set yourself apart with Adobe Creative Cloud Pro for students. Hone your skills with apps like Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere Pro, and more, powered with the latest in creative AI. Students save over 55%, so you can build a portfolio you're proud of. Launch your future with Adobe Creative Cloud Pro for students. Visit adobe.com/students to learn more.
This is Tristan Hopper, the host of Canada Did What?, where we unpack the biggest, weirdest, and wildest political moments in Canadian history you thought you knew and tell you what really happened. Stick around at the end of the episode to hear a sample of one of our favorite episodes. If you don't want to stick around, make sure you subscribe to Canada Did What? Everywhere you get podcasts.
So, Mark, you say that the NDP is the greatest enemy of the NDP.
Oh, absolutely.
And before I get into why you describe that in the book, I want to set it in terms of the politics that's happening right now in Ottawa. So, the NDP's down to 7 seats. The Liberals are 4 seats short, once you count the Speaker, for passing their budget. And there's a big thing about, will we have an election? And the NDP, everyone looked to them and said, well, I guess they're helping pass the budget, but they really don't want to, because part of the reason they've been reduced to 7 seats is, well, that damn coalition agreement that Jagmeet Singh signed them onto. And people were like, well, yeah, why not just vote for the Liberals? So, I mean, this is a really bad spot, because if they go to an election, they have no leader and they have no money, and they'll have zero credibility if they back the Liberals. So is this part of what you're talking about when you say that they're their own worst enemy?
Oh, that and so much more. But I mean, you look at it and go, I think a more effective leader than Singh could have made that agreement work just fine for them. I just think he was a dud as a politician from the get-go. And, part of the thesis of the book is that the Greens had a window. That window existed because of Singh, right? Like he teed that up. He left everything open for the Greens to move through and take over as, the perpetual third party. But I mean, I look now and I'm listening to people say, well, hey, how could things get worse for the NDP? And I'm like, I don't know. Ask Kim Campbell. Ask Jenny Kwan, who's in your caucus and served in a 2-person caucus in British Columbia. Because I look and go, regardless of what Carney does with the budget, there's nothing that has changed about the way Pierre Poilievre is resonating with the people who don't already dig him. So I think if the NDP goes to an election, Heather McPherson's going to be leader by default, because she's going to be the only one left standing.
Getting elected in Redmonton. Pretty safe seat for her.
She's the only one who got elected by a reasonable margin. I did the math, and it was like a few thousand. If you take that out of the equation, a few thousand votes separate the NDP from utter oblivion last election.
You talk about competent NDP leaders. You talk about Rachel Notley and the miracle that she had in Alberta. You also talk about Tom Mulcair, and some people see Tom Mulcair as a failure with the NDP. And in fact, Matthew Green, sadly an MP from my hometown with a bad attitude, you cite that he said Tom Mulcair's not really a New Democrat; he's a liberal. But Mulcair is a major reason why Jack Layton had the orange wave in
Absolutely.
2011 and doesn't get the credit for it because he was an effective campaigner. And while Jack was working in Ottawa and crisscrossing the country prior to the 2011 election, Tom Mulcair was going around Quebec, the region he knew so well, having worked as a bureaucrat, as an elected official, and recruiting candidates, serious candidates, setting up the infrastructure to win. They won 57 seats in Quebec. That made them official opposition. And when he took over from Jack, he gave the NDP their second best showing ever. And they said, nah, you got to go.
It was mind-blowing. But this gets into why I said off the top, the NDP's religion, because it is the only party that excommunicates you. And I mean, the Matthew Green also said, Mulcair, really more of a liberal than an NDPer. Not really an NDPer, a liberal. And what's fascinating is same thing about former premiers. So you'd think a party that wants to be diverse and representative and, take your pick wouldn't basically pretend Ujjal Dosanjh never happened after being Premier of BC because he went to Liberals. And then Bob Rae was never really NDP because he went to federal Liberals. And instead of going, they were never really NDP, I think there's a better question in why did they leave? What was it about the party that has cost them so many of the best and brightest? But instead it's like, oh, well, they were clearly never pure enough. They clearly, and I'm waiting for the day, and I think it's coming soon, that we hear, Jagmeet, he was never really NDP. Like, which other parties go, like, the number of times a year, they're really more liberal than NDP, and I'm like, so why do your members keep electing them as leader?
Well, look, I think the Conservatives do that to a degree, not to the same degree, but there is constantly this, down in the States, they'd be called rhinos, Republicans in name only.
Yeah.
And here they get called CINOs, conservatives in name only. And that's something that the NDP and the Conservatives have in common. It is they've all got the shibboleth test for you to see, are you one of us? Are you pure? Do you speak the language? And there's a big faction of the Conservative Party that would rather be pure and right in their own way and sit off in the corner, never being in power. That's a major part of the NDP is we'd rather be pure and never actually govern and get anything done, but at least we're right and we feel holier than thou, back to the title of your book.
Years now, yeah.
One of those guys is Avi Lewis. Now, I've never met Avi. I've got friends who've worked with him, who've been on a show, say he's a great guy, a smart guy, but he and his wife were part of the Leap Manifesto, which you do not appear to be a fan of. I'll let you explain why. But you had a line in the book that made me crack up, where you talked about Avi Lewis and his rhetoric,
Thank you.
referencing Greta Thunberg. And I actually burst out loud laughing. And I was like, yeah, that's it. The Leap Manifesto, I grew up in an NDP household. That would have made my father and all of the blue collar guys in my East Hamilton neighborhood that had orange signs on their lawn turned around and say, what the hell are you talking about?
Well, I mean, keep in mind, I'm a West Coast tree hunter whale lover, right? So I'm looking at the Leap Manifesto and I'm not objecting to it. I'm thinking this is pretty cool. But when they took out Mulcair, right, like two things that I wasn't a fan of. One, they launched the Leap Manifesto in the middle of the campaign, which was odd because the people who were launching the Leap Manifesto know that the NDP is supposed to take their marching orders from membership, which means there was no world in which the NDP could go, this is our policy. And I had a conversation with Finn Donnelly at one point where he felt the Leap Manifesto really took them off the game. And I remember when the Leap Manifesto came out and the number of pieces that ran in media, basically talking about how this was clearly the true NDP platform, and the lengths Mulcair went to distance himself from it were astonishing. So it became the focus of the campaign, but not in any positive way. And it felt like the Leap Manifesto basically sabotaged the party most likely to implement the Leap Manifesto. So that was problem one, was politically how it was introduced. My bigger one was that then the people from the Leap Manifesto basically have a coup, overthrow Tom Mulcair, and no one steps up. They took out the leader and then went, yes, mission accomplished. I went, no, that will be part one. If this is actually a plan.
You need to put someone in place that would implement this.
And at that time would have been a brilliant time for Avi Lewis to step up and go, as one of the authors of Leap Manifesto, I'm going to run. Or better yet, his wife, Naomi Klein, who has such massive media presence, right? And, wonderful speaker, all of the things you could possibly want in a leader. She could have stepped up. Any of the 50 celebrities who backed the Leap Manifesto could have stepped up. And nobody did. And there was not a particularly green person running for the NDP. And then Jagmeet shows up, and I don't think he said a word about the environment until he ran in Burnaby and went, oh, wow, pipelines. I better start talking about pipelines or I'm not winning this seat. And suddenly you hear all of this stuff about pipelines from which wasn't on his, definitely wasn't on, in the list of key talking points prior to moving to BC.
So give me your assessment of Jagmeet. Tom Mulcair inherited a party. I think when the 2015 election started, they had 95 seats. They went down to 44. Yeah, they lost a bunch of seats, but still second best showing ever for the federal NDP. They shove him out, as you say. Jagmeet wins, in part due to a broken leadership system that the NDP should really fix.
It's a bizarre leadership system, and it could really bite them again.
So you can easily get single issue voters winning in the NDP in ways that you can't with the two parties that actually vie for power in this country. Yep. So, but Jagmeet takes them from 44 seats to 24 in 2019. Then, okay, you got one more in 2021, but then down to 7. I mean, give me an assessment of him. And was it him? Was it his work ethic? Because I've often heard that criticized from New Democrats, that he wasn't putting in the work to build the party. Was it that he didn't seem believable? Was it racism? I'm sure that's part of it in parts of the country.
I'm sure it is, but they leaned into that. I found it fascinating that Mulcair basically said, Quebec voters are racist. And then the NDP goes, yeah, okay, we can deal with that, and Singh's our guy. I'm like, okay, that's a choice. But I look at Singh and go, to me, what stood out as the two things being pushed is why he'd be the perfect leader was he was going to revive the party in Ontario because he had profile in Ontario and he was going to make it rain. So he was going to bring in money and he was going to bring back the NDP to Ontario. And so what does he do? He can't get anybody to step down for him. He not only runs in BC, which sure, leaders do that. We just saw that with the Tories. You find a seat you can win. But he did something that I thought was just shocking. And it was the moment I went, I think I'm going green now. He announced he was going to stay in Burnaby and live in Burnaby. And I went, oh my God, he's abandoned Ontario. So I look at him and go, oh no, this was self-inflicted, right? If he couldn't win a seat in Ontario, he had no business being leader of that party because that was his value proposition. He was going to bring the NDP back in Ontario. And if he could and instead, he basically turned the NDP into a rival with the Greens in BC to win West Coast environmental votes, right? Like the way he reduced the party was astonishing.
And you're right. They're zero presence in Ontario now. They were below 5% in the last election. But how much of that is due to the winner of the 2025 Global Leader Award, Justin Trudeau? If you haven't seen, he got an award last night from some group in Chicago calling them the 2025 Global Leader of the Year. And I thought,
hilarious.
He just resigned. But, Trudeau really leaned into the
Green don't read the papers wherever they gave that award.
He resigned January 6th.
Or they wanted Katy Perry to show up at the award ceremony.
Oh, that could have been it. A good California girl. So Trudeau, that is, really leaned into Green politics. He tried to eat away at the Greens' lunch. He tried to outflank the NDP on many policies, not everything, but he not surprisingly, because of the people that surrounded him, a bunch of Kathleen Wynne Ontario Liberals went to work for Justin Trudeau. He did what Kathleen Wynne did, which worked for a little while here, which was, hey, let's outflank the NDP and take away their seats in power. So how much of the failure of both the Greens and the NDP is due to Justin Trudeau trying to outflank them and be like the greenest, NDP-ist liberal leader in government ever?
Oh, he definitely deserves some credit for that, but I mean, part of that again is just odd branding. It's very hard to believe when Tom Mulcair goes, I'm going to run on a balanced budget. I mean, that was the winning moment for Trudeau going, and I'm going to help people. I mean, politically, it was freaking awesome, So Mulcair says the NDP is going to balance the budget. Nobody believes him.
But think about your party. I mean, this is part of the problem with the NDP.
Yeah.
Is that it is a completely different party in every part of the country.
Yes.
Because Prairie New Democrats would have heard Tom Mulcair say, I'm going to balance the budget, and a lot of them would have said, oh, good, just like Roy Romano used to.
Yes.
And out west and in Ontario, they would have been like, oh, why is the bastard going to do that?
Mm-hmm. Well, this is one of the things that's fascinating to me. I've listened to all of the different pundits, mostly from Ontario, talking about how, well, the NDP is never going to go anywhere because just look at the presence they have in these provinces. And I'm like, Wab Kinew is not running a particularly left, party. And in most of the places the NDP is alive that are being cited as proof of life of the party, what you've essentially got is a two-party system where the NDP is essentially playing the part of liberals. You've got a party on the right-ish and a party on the left-ish in most provinces. And, there hasn't been a liberal party that was really aligned with the federal Liberal Party in BC probably in my lifetime. That's just not the brand here. When Gordon Campbell there was a brief moment when a guy named Gordon Wilson ran the Liberals where they believed in the same stuff as federal Liberals. Gordon Campbell just took it over because that was the vehicle that was going to beat the NDP.
Like the PC party in Alberta for decades, it was just the vehicle to power. I remember
Absolutely.
first time I'm in Calgary talking to people. I'm at the Petroleum Club of all places for an event, and these people are describing how they're strong PCers and have been members for years, and they donate money, and then they're telling me their political views, and I'm thinking, no, you're very much a New Democrat, but it was a one-party system.
Yeah.
Look, I know that the focus of your book was not the Ontario NDP, but since you know the party so well, you do know Ontario, and you mentioned the two-party system. After the 2018 Ontario election, when the Liberals were decimated and became known as the minivan party because they could all fit in one vehicle, I thought the NDP has a real chance here to
Yeah.
turn Ontario into a two-party state, the way things are in every province west of the Ontario-Manitoba border. I thought there was a real opportunity there. And Andrea Horwath and now Merritt Stiles have utterly failed to take advantage of that. And now there's a little bit of liberal life back, and Doug Ford's playing with the some of the election rules by extending the per vote subsidy. And the only reason he's doing that is not because he likes it, but because it keeps the Greens, the NDP, and the Liberals all alive so they can fight each other and he can win the next election and be premier forever. But do they just, from what you would know of the Ontario NDP, did they just not have the killer instinct to say, the Liberals are gasping for air, let's step on their neck a little bit?
They really didn't. And it was like, yes, let's go let's go more hardcore. And I'm like, no, this is the time you can go for it. And really, I always felt like Harper's endgame, and part of the affection that he seemed to have for Jack Layton was he was trying to get Canada down to a two-party system. That's what it always looked like to me, was that he was trying to go, yeah, if it's a binary between us and the NDP instead of us and the Liberals, we become the natural governing party, and they take over every 4 elections. That felt like Harper's endgame. I was like,
Harper, could have been.
My most accurate, freaky political prediction was a jillion years ago. I read a book called The Little Book of Reform about Preston Manning back when the party had 2 seats. That was on a political panel for TV Ontario on election night. And it was all comedians, and I got the biggest laugh of the night when all of the votes were in except for BC and Alberta. And they said, well, it looks like Bloc Quebec was the official opposition. I said, you haven't seen the votes from BC and Alberta yet. Stand tight, because I think, I think that Reform's going to take 50 seats. And wow, biggest laugh of the night. And when I wrote that book, people said, so do you think Preston Manning's going to be prime minister? I said, hell no. The guy to watch is this guy, Stephen Harper, who's done everything with him. And I was so proud of that. And I kept telling people, no, the guy to watch is Stephen Harper, because he seems to be planning everything right down to, really, the genius self-destruct clause in the Reform Party that went, if we don't achieve this and this and this by such and such a date, we start a new party. And the Canadian Alliance happened. I'm like, wow, I so wish progressive parties would take that approach and go, yeah, this didn't work. We're going to start again.
We'll do something new.
Yeah. That would be exciting. That would be interesting. And I thought, wow, he's figured out how to do that. So
let me ask you, you finished talking about bright green politics and going forward. Where does the Green movement go? Is it part of the progressive movement? Mark Carney is a different cat. Of course, he wrote Values, which I think is on the shelf behind me here. He wrote Values, which was very much a green progressive manifesto of sorts. Doesn't seem to be governing that way. So it looks like, these parties might be dead right now, but with the right leader, the right pitch, there's an opportunity for them. So what do you see in the coming years? Make your Stephen Harper-like prediction for the Green and the progressive side.
My Stephen Harper-like prediction right now is that as long as Poilievre's around, I think Carney can do pretty much anything. And he's going to keep the NDP and the Greens off the map. Because I think, in some respects, the Greens finally got the ultimate wish. They had Poilievre was running on a campaign all about climate policy. He was trying desperately to turn everything into climate policy. The most hilarious line was he seems to get so attached to certain phrasings that he was talking about carbon tax Clark when he was, when she looked like she might run for Liberals. I'm like, oh, you mean the woman who got rid of the carbon tax? That's who you're trying?
The woman who approved LNG pipelines?
That's who you're going to tag as the carbon tax candidate. But I feel like he's creating a really untenable situation for pretty much anybody who isn't, like I said, isn't into him. So we'll see, but I kind of wish that the Carney who's governing would meet the Carney who wrote values. Uh, I wish those two guys would have a conversation.
I did hear someone say recently that they want to know which Mark Carney is going to govern. Is it the fiscally conservative Mark Carney, who was the Bank of Canada governor through the fiscal crisis in 0809?
Yeah.
Is it the values Mark Carney, who clearly was on the progressive green side of things, declaring that Greta is one of his people? Is it the centrist Mark Carney that wants you to believe he's something different than those previous two? And the fact is, we still don't know. I keep citing an obscure movie called About Last Night, where Rob Lowe keeps asking Jim Belushi, is she a pro? And the answer is, at this point, we don't know. And that's my answer to about everything with Mark Carney. At this point, we don't know.
I get that.
So, Mark, politics should be fun and funny, and folks from different sides should talk. So thanks for the book, because it is fun, and thanks for coming on the podcast and having a fun conversation.
Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Full Comment is a post-media podcast. My name's Brian Lilly, your host. This episode was produced by Andre Proulx, theme music by Bryce Hall. Kevin Libin is the executive producer. Please hit subscribe, give us a like, share us on social media. Thanks for listening. Until next time, I'm Brian Lilly.
Here's that clip from Canada Did What? I promised you.
So, although abortion was sort of accessible, it really wasn't.
But then 1988 rolls around. And what's the law on abortion then? Suddenly, there wasn't one. Literally no restrictions existed in 1988. Abortion went from heavily restricted to completely unrestricted almost overnight. There was no referendum on this. There wasn't even an act of parliament. This whole thing is due to a somewhat surprise decision out of the Supreme Court of Canada. And it came about in large part because of one man, a Canadian doctor who had been relentless about running illegal abortion clinics since the 1960s and was determined to overturn the laws prohibiting the practice. Along the way, he endured multiple arrests, constant raids, a jail term, a firebombing of his clinic, an attack by a fanatic wielding garden shears, the approbation of virtually his entire profession, and frequent death threats. If you want to hear the rest of the story, make sure you subscribe to Canada Did What? Everywhere you get your podcasts.